Welcome to a tutorial on managing your GDN project in Smartling. Smartling's Global Delivery Network, or GDN, is a translation proxy that enables you to localize your website in a highly automated way. In this video, we will discuss how GDN projects are managed on a daily basis in Smartling and how translation jobs can be created. To better understand how a GDN project is organized in Smartling, let's first take a look at how website content is uploaded and translated with the GDN. In a first step, the localized page needs to be visited, even if it hasn't been translated yet. This allows the GDN to browse the page for translatable text. Once a page has been visited, using the localized URL, the source content from this page is automatically sent to your associated GDN project in Smartling. In Smartling, the new content is awaiting authorization and needs to be put into a translation job to kick off the translation process. Translation jobs can either be created manually, or a jobs automation rule can be used to create translation jobs automatically in regular intervals. We will learn more about both options later in this video. The job can then be authorized into your preferred translation workflow. While the translation is being worked on, the original text in the source language is still displayed on the localized page. Of course, Smartling offers advanced solutions to prevent untranslated text from being shown to your page visitors. Once each individual string is fully translated and reaches the published step in Smartling, the translation is automatically displayed on the localized web page. Let's now take a closer look at each of these steps. To upload the content from a web page to your Smartling project for translation, the localized page needs to be browsed. This means that the page needs to be visited on the localized domain, even if it hasn't been translated yet. This allows the GDN to scan the page for translatable text. Pages can be browsed and uploaded to Smartling in 3 different ways. You can manually visit a page that you would like to translate simply by typing the URL in the address bar of your browser in its localized version. So, for example, if you want to translate this page and French is one of your target languages, you'll need to visit this page in its French version, even though it hasn't been translated yet. Of course, the structure of your localized URLs may look a little bit different depending on your exact domain strategy. In many cases, pages are also visited and browsed simply through the organic use of the localized website when your site visitors in various countries, or even bots, try to reach a certain page. If you would like to take a more automated and scheduled approach, you can make use of Smartling's GDN Crawler to browse specific pages or parts of your website without any human involvement. We will learn more about the GDN Crawler later on in this video, when we will discuss how to automate the creation of translation jobs in your GDN project. Once a page has been visited using the localized URL, whether it be by a human page visitor, by a bot, or by the GDN crawler, the source content from the visited page is automatically sent to your GDN project in Smartling. If you use the GDN to translate your website into multiple target languages, you do not need to browse the localized page for each language. It is sufficient to visit the localized page for one of your target languages to scan it for translatable text. Once it is in Smartling, the source content can then be translated into all of your target languages. Once the page has been browsed, the source content is now available for translation in Smartling. While HTML content is captured by default when your website is browsed, other content types, such as JavaScript or JSON, require some additional attention in order to be ingested correctly. Please feel free to contact your Smartling representative for further guidance when configuring your GDN project. In your GDN project, there are two places where you can access and manage translatable content. Instead of the usual Files tab, you can find a Pages tab in your GDN project. That's because the GDN allows you to translate your website content without the need to upload or download files. Instead, the translatable content is structured by URL in the Pages tab of your Smartling project. You can work with these pages in a similar way as you might work with files in your other Smartling projects. You can, for example, filter for particular pages and request them for translation. Please note that the Pages tab only shows the URL that the string was first captured from. It is not in all cases a direct reflection of all pages where a string is actually used on your website. This is due to the fact that strings can be captured and ingested by Smartling only from one URL. The translation is then shared across all pages using the same string. We will discuss this more in detail later in this video when we will talk about string sharing. For a more granular view of the translatable content, please navigate to the Strings view. In Smartling, the page content is automatically split out into smaller translation units called strings. HTML content is broken down into strings based on block-level tags. This means that if you see a paragraph of text on the source page, you will most likely see the same paragraph for translation in Smartling. Tags used for hyperlinks or text formatting are automatically grayed out and protected during the translation process. Of course, you can make use of a range of filtering options on the left, such as the URL filter, to see content from a specific page only. After a page has been browsed, the strings from that URL are not part of any translation job yet, and they show up in your Smartling project with the status awaiting authorization. So as a next step, the content from the visited page needs to be bundled up into a translation job and authorized to kick off the actual translation process. There are two ways of doing this. The strings can be put into a translation job manually, or a job's automation rule can be used to create translation jobs automatically in regular intervals. To manually create a translation job, we would recommend using the Strings view, since it allows you to check the content before putting it into a job. Here you can filter for content that is not in a job for the URL that you just browsed. To see only the new content that has not been translated into any of your target languages yet, please filter for the status awaiting authorization and tick the checkbox Show Source Language Only. Now you can see only the strings that have not been authorized for any of your target languages. Instead of displaying each string for all of your target languages, this view now shows each string only once, so you can easily scan and check the source content. To create a translation job for this content, select all strings corresponding to the selected filter. Then, from the Actions menu, choose the option Request Translation. You can now create a job for the selected strings. In a second step, this job needs to be authorized into your preferred translation workflow to kick off the actual translation process. Once a job has been created, the progress can be monitored at any time from the Jobs tab. Instead of creating jobs manually, Jobs automation rules can be used to define which pages should be put into a translation job automatically. Once the content is available in Smartling, it can be bundled up into a translation job on a regular schedule and, if desired, authorized automatically. Jobs automation rules help cut back significantly on the manual effort needed to manage a GDN project, so we would recommend using them as extensively as possible. To fully automate the entire process of ingesting the content from the pages that you would like to translate and then bundling them up into a job, we would recommend using Jobs automation rules in conjunction with the GDN Crawler. So before creating a Jobs automation rule, you might also want to automate the process of browsing the relevant pages by setting up the GDN Crawler. From your account settings, please access the GDN Crawler. Here you can specify which pages should be browsed automatically for new content to translate. To do so, please add a configuration. First, you need to enter a name for this new configuration and select your GDN project, which the browsed content should be uploaded to. We would recommend selecting a name that clearly indicates which pages or which parts of your website will be browsed by this crawler configuration. Then specify which localized domain the content should be captured from. Typically, it is sufficient to select the localized domain for only one of your target languages here. Usually, you do not need to create separate GDN crawler rules for each of your target languages. As long as the source content is captured from one localized domain, it will be available for translation into all target languages in Smartling. When the GDN crawler scans your website for new content, by default, it starts doing so from the home page and then browses all pages that are linked from there. If instead you would like the GDN crawler to check only specific pages for translatable content, you can define exactly which pages should be included or excluded. For example, if there are any pages that are updated very frequently, they can be included in a crawler configuration to ensure that new content is uploaded to Smartling on your preferred schedule, so it can then be translated in a timely manner. The GDN crawler also comes in handy if you are using a staging site, or if you would like to browse parts of your website which are rarely visited in an organic way. You can specify if the GDN crawler should capture content from any pages that link out from the included URLs, and how deep the scan should go. A crawl depth of 0 means that we will scan only the URLs specified in the included list. A crawl depth of 1 means that the crawler will also browse pages that link out directly from the included URLs. A crawl depth of 2 will include pages that are 2 levels or 2 links away from the included URLs, and so on. If user agents, HTTP headers, or authentication or session cookies need to be defined, for example to access login protected content, to bypass location cookies, or to avoid the GDN crawler traffic being blocked from your website, we would recommend setting them up in collaboration with your web operations team. Then click Save Configuration to confirm. Once a rule has been set up to define which pages should be included in the scan for new translatable text, you can now set up a crawl schedule. Simply select the crawl configuration that you just created and then define a schedule for it. The ideal schedule depends on the size of your website and the frequency with which the configured URLs are updated. Once the crawl schedule has been established and saved, new translatable content from the specified pages will be uploaded automatically to your GDN project in Smartling. After each crawl has been completed, you can check exactly how much content was discovered and uploaded to Smartling. Once you have ensured that the relevant pages will be browsed, you can now set up the corresponding jobs automation rules. Jobs automation rules run on a specified schedule to pick up new content that is already available in Smartling and bundle it up into a translation job automatically. Only content that is awaiting authorization and not part of any job yet will be included. Strings that are already in a job will not be moved to a different job by a jobs automation rule, even if the initial job hasn't been authorized yet. To set up a jobs automation rule, please click into the account-wide Jobs tab in the top navigation bar. Then navigate to the Automation Rules. Here you can see any jobs automation rules that may already be set up for your account. To set up a new jobs automation rule, please click Create Rule. From the drop-down menu, select your GDN project. The job name, which you can enter here, will be used for all jobs created with this rule. An optional description can be added for further context and will also appear on all jobs created with this rule. To ensure that future jobs can be easily identified, we would recommend choosing a job name that clearly indicates which pages or parts of your website are included. This makes it easier at a later stage to determine the purpose of each job that will be created automatically. Job automation rules are meant to run in regular intervals. So as a next step, you will need to set up a schedule for the job creation. We would recommend syncing up the jobs automation schedule with your GDN Crawler schedule, so jobs can be created right after each crawl has been completed. Then select the target languages which should be included in the job. By default, jobs created with an automation rule only include net new content, which has not been authorized for any of your target languages yet. However, you have the option to include content which isn't part of any job for the specified target languages, even if it has already been authorized into other languages. Jobs created with an automation rule can be authorized for translation automatically. If you would like to use this option, you will need to select the desired workflow for each language. Once a job has been created with this rule, it then gets authorized automatically into the selected workflow. We would recommend leaving this setting switched off at first, so you can check the content that's included in the jobs and authorize them manually. Once you are certain that everything works as you expected, you can then switch on this setting and proceed to authorize jobs automatically. Similarly, if you make any changes to your website other than pure content changes, we would recommend that you reassess your jobs automation settings and check that the correct content is being captured before it gets authorized automatically. By default, Jobs Automation Rules will pick up all new content and place it into a job. To ensure that only the relevant content will be included in each job, the content filter can be used to narrow down the exact pages that the jobs should be created for. Under Domains, you can choose which source domains should be included. However, depending on your exact GDN integration, the domain which strings are ingested from may show up in Smartling either as the source domain or as a localized domain. This is only a reflection of the different methods of capturing strings, and it has no impact on the translation process itself. However, to prevent any issues with jobs automation rules, which do take into account the domain of ingestion, we would recommend leaving the domain field empty. That way, strings can be included in a job and translated into any language, regardless of the exact technical configuration which they were captured by. Of course, the domain filter may still be useful if your GDN project is used to translate multiple different websites within the same Smartling project. For example, if your GDN project is set up for a staging site and a production site, you can, of course, filter for the relevant domain here. You can then define which URLs should be included in the jobs or excluded. Ideally, we would recommend syncing this up with the pages that are included and excluded in your GDN Crawler configuration. If certain parts of your website, which encompass more than one URL, should be included or excluded, you can use an asterisk as a wildcard. If your translation vendor prefers to work on smaller batches of content, you could set up multiple jobs per day and create a word count rule for each of them. This allows you to set up a maximum number of weighted words per job. If you decide to have new jobs authorized automatically, we would recommend defining also some due date rules. Of course, these job due dates should be in line with your translation vendor's SLAs. If you would like any of your team members to receive an email notification when the job automation rule runs, you can pick their name from the drop-down menu or enter their email address. These notifications are particularly helpful if you would like to check the content of each new job before authorizing it for translation. You can simply click on the direct link to the job that you can find in the notification email to check the strings and authorize the job. To create the jobs automation rule, please click Save. Once the rule has been created, it can be edited, enabled, or disabled from the Automation Rules page. Rules can be run manually at any time by clicking the Play button, if you don't want to wait for the automated schedule to run. It is possible to create multiple jobs automation rules for the same project. To ensure that the jobs will be created in line with your requirements, there are a few things to consider when stacking multiple jobs automation rules. If one of the jobs automation rules includes only very specific URLs, then this rule should be scheduled to run before any other rules, which may include a wider range of pages and wildcards. So the more specific rule should run first to ensure that those exact pages can be bundled up into a job. Any less specific rules should then be scheduled to run after it to pick up the remaining content. Similarly, if a specific URL is included as part of one job's automation rule, we would recommend excluding this same URL from any parallel jobs automation rules to avoid any overlaps. Whether you choose to authorize jobs automatically or not, we would recommend checking the included content on a regular basis. To do so, please click into the job and click Use Strings. Especially after the initial creation of a new rule or after any updates to your rules, your website, or GDN configuration, we would recommend checking the strings to ensure that everything has been configured and captured correctly. If an update is required to an existing translation, which has already reached the published step, it is usually sufficient to amend the translation in Smartling. The updated translation will then be displayed immediately on the localized page. In case the updated translation is not displayed automatically, this may be due to caching. We would recommend reaching out to your web operations team or to your Smartling representative for further guidance. Any new website content gets continuously uploaded to Smartling as soon as it is browsed by your site visitors. Therefore, we would recommend checking the new content in your Smartling project on a regular basis. Even if jobs automation rules are in place, jobs will not be created automatically for any URLs that are not included in those rules. To check the new content, which has not been picked up and put into a job yet, please navigate to the Strings view. Here you can filter for strings that are currently not in a job and awaiting authorization. To see only net new strings, which have not been authorized for any of your target languages yet, please also tick the checkbox Show Source Language Only. These new strings are available in the Strings view for 14 days after they have been uploaded to your Smartling project. If by the end of those 14 days the strings have not been placed into a job for any of your target languages, they will be removed from this view and only uploaded to Smartling again when the relevant pages are browsed another time. Therefore, we would recommend checking the new strings on a regular basis. For any content that you would like to get translated, you can create a translation job as usual, simply by selecting the relevant strings and then choosing the option Request Translations from the Actions menu. Once the job has been authorized, the selected strings are now being translated. If some of your strings contain variable elements that should not be translated, such as numbers or prices, you can use patterns. For example, this string contains an order number, which will be different for each customer and each order. Instead of retranslating the same string with a new order number every single time, we can simply establish that there is a pattern consisting of this specific source text followed by a variable number. So patterns can be used to turn dynamic and variable text elements into placeholders that are blocked from translation. That way, the text around the placeholder needs to be translated only once. To set up a pattern or placeholder, simply select the relevant string and choose the option Create Pattern from the Actions menu. By default, the entire string is going to be turned into a placeholder. This works well if the entire string consists, for example, only of a variable number. On the other hand, if you would like to use a placeholder only for parts of the selected string, please untick the option Match Full Strings. You can now select the exact part of the string that should be set as a pattern and click Add Placeholder from Selection. Once you have ensured that the pattern matching rule is set up correctly, you can then see which unauthorized strings the pattern will be applied to. If there are any strings listed here that you don't want to apply the pattern to, you can exclude them. To confirm, please click Create Pattern. The pattern has now been created. As soon as the page containing the string with the pattern is browsed again, the string is now ingested using a placeholder instead of the variable text element. This placeholder will also be applied to any future strings that match the same pattern. Existing patterns can be managed at any time from the Settings tab of your GDN project under Patterns Management. If there is any content in your strings view that should remain untranslated, you can exclude the relevant strings from translation. For example, if source strings consist of text that's already translated, or if they look like code snippets rather than translatable text, you might want to exclude them from the translation process. To do so, please select the relevant strings and choose the option Exclude from the Actions menu. Strings can be excluded for all target languages or for individual target languages only. Once a string has been excluded, the text will show up in the source language on the localized pages. Excluded strings will not be uploaded for translation again. If you do want to translate an excluded string at a later point, it first needs to be restored from the Actions menu. Once restored, the string will be awaiting authorization again and can then be put into a translation job. In the Actions menu, you can also find an option to delete strings which should not be translated. Unlike the Exclude option, deleting strings is not a permanent action. Deleted strings are removed from the strings view temporarily, but they will be uploaded to your Smartling project again if the same page is browsed again. For this reason, the Delete option should only be used after a correction to the project configuration has been made. For example, if some of the content awaiting authorization in your strings view looks like code, an adjustment to your project configuration may be required. After the GDN configuration has been tweaked accordingly, the strings can then be deleted. Provided that the GDN configuration was updated correctly, the deleted strings should no longer be captured and uploaded to your Smartling project. If the configuration of your GDN project needs to be adjusted, this is typically achieved by setting up rules. By default, all ingestible content on the domain that is associated with your GDN project will be translated. However, GDN rules can be put in place if there is any content that should never be captured and translated with the GDN. To check any existing rules or to set up a new one, please click into the Settings tab of your GDN project and then navigate to the Rules. Here you can set up rules to prevent content from being captured, translated, localized, or displayed at all. These rules can be set up for an entire page or on an even more granular level for certain HTML elements only. In addition to these basic GDN rules, it is also possible to configure advanced rules to further fine-tune the configuration of the translation proxy. If you would like to set up a new rule in your GDN project, please consult our Help Center and feel free to reach out to your Smartling representative. Advanced rules in particular should only be configured by developers who have in-depth knowledge of your source site. Sometimes you may want to display some content on your localized pages, which is not just a direct translation of the source content, but truly specific to the target market. For example, you might want to switch out your company's contact details so your local audience can reach your offices directly in their own country, or use images that better reflect the local culture and environment. In those cases where content needs to be adapted to the target market rather than translated, the GDN allows you to swap out content blocks or images for locale-specific ones. To learn more about content swaps and how to set them up, please visit our Help Center. The GDN allows you to capture a snapshot of the page to translate, which is shown to the linguists in the CAT tool. This visual context gives the linguists a better understanding of the content that they are translating, and it can have a great impact on the translation quality. Generally, visual context is captured automatically for HTML content on your web pages and will be available automatically in the CAT tool. If your site is using pop-ups, such as cookie banners, they may block the context view. To prevent this from happening, please consult with your team to set up custom JavaScript or CSS to bypass banners or pop-ups. Depending on how your site is built, visual context may not be captured automatically for all content. For example, if the strings to translate come directly from JavaScript or JSON content, a different solution may be required to provide visual context in Smartling. Please feel free to reach out to your Smartling representative for further guidance and information about other methods of capturing visual context. As we have seen before, the content to translate gets sent to Smartling once the localized page has been browsed. In Smartling, the new strings are now associated with the URL where they were first detected. If a different page that is browsed and translated at a later point contains the same source text, we will not ingest that same string a second time. Instead, the page that was browsed for translation at a later stage will simply use the same translation as the page that was browsed before. So if two pages use the same source string, it is ingested and sent to Smartling only once from the page where it was first detected by the GDN. The URL that was first visited and browsed remains associated with the string in Smartling. This concept of strings being shared across multiple pages is crucial to understanding a number of scenarios. In Smartling, each string can only be associated with one URL and be part of one job. So if the URL where a string was first detected is already part of a translation job, then the same string cannot simultaneously be put into a different translation job for another URL. If you filter for another URL that contains the same string but was browsed more recently, the shared string is not included in the search results. So if you create a translation job for the page that was browsed at a later stage, the shared string will not be included in the job, as it is not associated with that URL in Smartling. If a string has been excluded on the page that it was ingested from, or if it hasn't been authorized yet, it will show up in the source language on all pages that share the same string. For this reason, instead of excluding strings, it is often preferable to use GDN rules if content should remain untranslated for certain pages only. Unlike the option to exclude strings, rules allow you to specify the exact page where content should not be captured or translated. The visual context, which is displayed in the cat tool, is also captured only once. So the visual context displays the page that the string was first detected on. If necessary, the context, which was captured from the first URL, can be removed via the Actions menu in the Strings view. Visual context from the new page can then be captured manually, for example by using Smartling's Context Capture Chrome extension. Translating each string only once not only saves you translation costs and valuable time, but it also improves the consistency of the translations throughout your website. If, however, you would prefer not to share strings across multiple pages, please reach out to your Smartling representative to discuss the possibility of treating strings on each page as separate from each other by enabling unique namespaces for each page. By default, when a source page is updated, the new strings show up in the source language on the localized page. As soon as the localized version of the updated page has been browsed, the new strings are ingested into Smartling and can be sent for translation. Once the new strings are fully translated and reach the published step in Smartling, the translation is then displayed on the localized page. So while the new strings are being worked on, the same page could show a mix of source language text and translated text until all strings have been fully published. This is often referred to as bleed-through. To prevent this from happening, Smartling offers a few different solutions to avoid or minimize bleed-through. One of the easiest ways to avoid untranslated text from being displayed is to use machine translations across your entire website until the translations are completed in your regular workflow. From the Settings tab in your GDN project, this automatic machine translation can be configured. Once enabled, any new strings will automatically display a machine translation on the localized site. You can then ingest the content and authorize it into your usual translation workflow. For example, a workflow using human translation. As soon as a string has gone through the regular translation workflow and has reached the published step, the machine translation is then replaced with the new translation that is published in Smartling. After it has been enabled in the GDN settings, the preferred machine translation provider for this site-wide machine translation can be configured under your account settings by clicking into the Machine Translation Settings and then navigating to the GDN tab. Alternatively, it is possible to connect your Smartling GDN project to your staging site, so new content can be translated before it is published on your production site. The content from your staging site can be browsed and put into a translation job as usual. Provided that the translations are completed and have reached the published step, they can be leveraged for the production site once the content goes live. In order to do so, simply browse the relevant pages on your localized production site. The existing translations from your staging environment are then applied automatically. To get more information on how to connect your Smartling project to your staging site, we would recommend reaching out to your Smartling representative for further guidance. If you would like translations to show up on the localized page even before they reach full completion in Smartling, you can make use of our pre-publishing feature. Pre-published strings are still in progress in a translation workflow, but the current translation is already displayed on the localized page. This is especially useful if your workflow includes an internal review step, which may extend the overall turnaround time of your translation jobs. You can simply pre-publish the translations that were saved by your translation vendor, so they are already shown on the localized page. If any changes are then made by the reviewers at a later stage, the updated translation will be displayed automatically. To pre-publish translations that are still in progress, please navigate to the Strings view. Simply select the translations to be pre-published and choose the option Pre-publish from the Actions menu. If you would like to always pre-publish the translations once they enter a particular step in your workflow, such as an internal review step, you can make use of the option to pre-publish strings on a particular workflow step. Another option to prevent untranslated text from showing up on your localized pages is Smartling's static cache. The static cache becomes effective when a page that was previously translated is updated with some new content at a later point. Instead of showing the new content in the source language while the translations are being worked on, the static cache ensures that your page visitors will only see the previous version of the localized page, which had been fully translated. Only once all new strings have been fully translated and published, the updated version of the localized page will then be displayed. So the static cache ensures that new content is only shown on the translated page once it has been fully translated. To discuss if Smartling's static cache is a good fit for your project, please feel free to reach out to your Smartling representative. Of course, you can find further information about Smartling's global delivery network and all of its settings in our Help Center. Thank you very much for watching and for your time today.